Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, episode number 24, with my guest today, live streaming on YouTube. So if you're subscribing to the YouTube channel, you will be able to see this, and if you're not, you'll be able to watch the video afterward. Josh Poland. Hi, Josh. How you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. How you doing?
Good. So this is going to be an excellent little episode that we are going to have. It's going to be amazing. We're going to talk about all kinds of different things on the podcast today. We're going to cover our great book, which I'm going to show you all a picture of, the Tao of Jeet Kune by the late and definitely great Bruce Lee. Reading from the Tao of Jeet Kune a little bit from the introduction, from the first initial pages 10 and 11 in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. And I quote directly from, as I said, the late, great Bruce Lee. Art is never decoration, embellishment. Instead, it is a work of enlightenment. Art, in other words, is a technique for acquiring liberty. Art calls for complete mastery of techniques developed by reflection within the soul. Artless art is the artistic process within the artist, meaning it is the art of the soul. It is all various moves of all tools means a step on the way to the absolute aesthetic world of the soul. Creation in art is the psychic unfolding of the personality, which is rooted in the nothing. Its effect is a deepening of the personal dimension of the soul. All vague notions must fall before a pupil can call himself a master. Artistic skill, therefore, does not mean artistic perfection. It remains rather a continuing medium or reflection of some step in psychic development, the perfection of which is not to be found in shape and form, but must radiate from the human soul. It is in the artistic process, therefore, that is reality, and reality is truth. The path to truth, seeking after truth, awareness of truth and its existence, perception of truth, its substance and direction, like the perception of movement, understanding of truth, a first-rate philosopher practices it to understand it, the Tao, not to be fragmented, but to see the totality, experiencing of truth, mastering of truth, forgetting the carrier of truth, return to the primal source where truth has its roots, and repose in the nothing. For security, the unlimited living is turned into something dead, a chosen pattern that limits. To understand Jeet Kune Do, one ought to throw away all ideals, patterns, styles. In fact, he should throw away even the concepts of what is or isn't ideal in Jeet Kune Do. Can you look at a situation without naming it? Naming it, making it a word, causes fear. What can be said about Bruce Lee? And we're going to say a lot more about Bruce Lee today, but what can be said about Bruce Lee that hasn't already been said before, right? From Quentin Tarantino to Jet Li, the shadow of Bruce Lee over the martial arts, over the martial practices, from Hollywood to a Buddhist monk's retreat in Western China, is just now beginning to fade at the beginning part of the 21st century. But it's not all quite gone out of the water just yet. We read Miyamoto Musashi's A Book of Five Rings in a previous episode this month. Go check that out. It's a big 4-hour monster. You're going to want to listen to that. And Bruce Lee's writing, and what we're doing here at the end of this month, represents a nice little bookend to Musashi's deliberative, practical, philosophical thought process on the intersections between combat, life, and leadership. Lee was a thinker, a fighter, an entrepreneur, a film producer, and, I almost never use this word, an iconoclast due to his unfortunate and untimely death at the age of 32. You can read his biography on Wikipedia if you want the list of famous people he trained, influenced, and impacted. And for my money, his best film was, of course, and I believe Josh agrees with this, his best film was, of course, Enter the Dragon. As a thinker, however, his work is either overlooked in America, because due to us in the West really liking compartmentalization, we can only really put the man in one or maybe two boxes. Or, counterintuitively, his work is overvalued in the West because due to his untimely death, we tend to idolize people who would, over a long enough time frame, be eventually revealed to have feet of clay. But his book, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do, an eclectic collection of journal writings, thoughts, aphorisms, and philosophical musings that set the basis not for a way to fight someone, but instead created a basis for a way to think about how to fight someone, is often overlooked and misunderstood. And so today on the podcast, today on the live stream, and when you're watching this later on the video, we are going to break down Bruce Lee's The Tao of Jeet Kune Do and place it in the context of jiu-jitsu, lived combat, leadership, and life. And I can't think of a better person to do this with today than a Marine combat veteran, business owner, an instructor, and practitioner of Kyudo and jiu-jitsu, and my personal instructor, Josh Poland. Welcome to the podcast, Josh.
This is gonna be awesome.
Well, we're gonna kind of we're gonna take another bite at the apple on this one.
Yeah.
We're gonna take another bite at the apple on this one. So
This time we didn't have a lot of technical difficulties like we did last time.
yeah, there we go. Exactly. Yeah, with portions of this program, please stand by. Let's do this. I kind of gave you an introduction there. Why don't you explain to the folks sort of who you are, what you do? Talk to us a little bit about Poland's MMA and a little bit about your background in the United States Marine Corps, for which you are repping over your shoulder and everywhere else on your body, and direct from your house in your bedroom. So just talk to us a little bit about sort of how you got to where you are in your path here, and how Bruce Lee has impacted you.
Well, everywhere you start, it goes into a beginning phase, like, right? So like for me, I started when I was really young. I started at 4. And what really actually started me in martial arts was I was in the living room, right? And I was mimicking and copying the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles, just going, "Aya! Aya!" breaking crap, just going through the process. And my dad, he goes there and goes, "Okay, well, let's why not?"
Right, exactly, yeah.
Why not? So I actually started at 4 years old in Shotokan karate, and then down in Arlington, Texas. We moved to where we currently reside now in Granbury when I was 6. So I got a little up there, and then there wasn't at the time any Shotokan karate. There still is no Shotokan here in Granbury. There's Yoshikai, but there's if y'all know anything about karate, there's over 36 styles in karate, which is not the same. So there's definitely an inequality of, which is a kind of a undivided word to use, an inequality and the differences in the Japanese arts when it comes to karate itself, especially Shotokan. So going into that, I started martial arts, and then kind of went down a little fast pace. I got my black belt, and I picked up Taekwondo, which I got my first degree black belt in Taekwondo when I was 14. And then 2006, when I picked up Kyudo, and I transitioned over as a black belt in Kyudo from there. I met Grandmaster Yun Kim. My current instructor before then was Grandmaster Minmu Her. So definitely both were colorful. One was more colorful than the other, and one had a little bit more of a personality than the other one did. So one had at least a better language barrier because they're both Koreans. So one had been around for a little bit, and versus one hadn't. So so you're like, meh, all right. But so from right there, I started diving into different martial arts, and kind of what we were talking about Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's philosophy goes into where it's an open flow mindset,
right,
where you don't become single-minded in anything that you do.
Right.
And so with that being said, we look into the process of, I look at it towards like, I'm going to be doing a lot of different styles, which at this point, I've already started into diving in hugely into different martial arts when I was 10.
Mm-hmm.
I started doing Kinjitsu, Kung Fu, Aikido, which I wasn't really big fan of Aikido for numerous reasons. It just didn't fit my format because I was doing anything between American kickboxing and Thai boxing as well. Just a little bit of form into it, and then the instructor at the time, he moved, and then there wasn't any Thai boxing around. He's actually in the area, just at the time he didn't know where he went. So he's still around, but he doesn't own a school. He just does his own thing now. When it comes to jiu-jitsu itself, high level caliber black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
And then now the next piece about the puzzle, 18, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, and that was, so I was from 2008 of August 2008 to August 2012. Mm-hmm. And at that point I was infantry. I was 0311. And for our unit, you really went into the process of being cross-trained. You had to be cross-trained in every single element, and a lot of people give a bad rep to grunts. They're like, grunts are stupid meat wagons or whatever, bullet sponges, whatever derogatory stupidity words you want to use. And it's like, yeah, well, and going through that process, and that goes multiple different styles like in different jobs. So you had a regular infantryman, you had the assaultman, you had the mortarman, you had the machine gunner. I was preferably cross-trained as a machine gunner in between the heavy, light, medium, heavyweight. Heavy. Might as well. The Modus was definitely a big Bertha.
It's not that's not a tiny weapon, no.
No, it's a heavy Bertha. Going into that, so did 2 combat tours. One was a summer deployment. One was a winter deployment. One was more concussed than the other. Summertime was more along the lines of that was the fighting season for the Taliban. And then when I explained to people, when I asked me, because you get the intelligence, have you killed anybody? Have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? Like, well, my favorite way of explaining to people is that you never ask someone if they killed somebody. However, I played some wicked laser tag in the sandbox. We played some wicked laser tag.
Tag. You're it.
Here, hold this.
Yeah.
Hold this for me while I'm over here.
Right.
Down the road a little bit. But yeah, so just going into that. So I got out of the Marine Corps in 2012, and just like everybody else, when you first get out, they do the best that they can, which really is just death by PowerPoint. Mm-hmm. Anyone that gets out of the military, they know is this death by PowerPoint. It's like, all right, don't kill anyone when you get out of the military. Don't beat your wife. Don't do this. And they do a certain of jobs. I remember going through there. It was just weeks upon weeks of just different job applications. They went anywhere between, which was really interesting because they went anywhere between how to be a truck driver, which really threw me off. Honestly, it was like, oh, you want to be truck?
Okay.
Right. And you had different opportunities for like medical field, law enforcement, but it was primarily because I was in California. So it was primarily in the California state as a whole, which no thanks. And at that point as well, then you had the private the PMCs, private contractors. So they were there too. It's like, hey, you want to go back overseas, play some laser tag? Hey,
right. You want to keep Halliburton came knocking at your door and said, "How would you like to come work for us?"
So it was a lot of different ones there too. So, that at that point is like, no, good. Yeah. I did have a thought of re-enlisting, and then personal thoughts came up into it, and my own survivor's guilt and everything else. Like, no, I'm good. I'm
Mhm.
gonna go ahead and get out. So I did. I EAS'd in August 17th of 2012, and I remember, just like everyone else was, I got into work. For me personally, I was actually in a full-time gig,
Mhm.
a date in my third day of being out. I was working for a sign company.
Mhm.
And so down here and over in the new TCU stadium, I was a part of that
Mhm.
construction crew of getting the signs up, the build, and everything else.
Yeah.
But a month later, I was released. Not because I did anything bad. It was because they're kind of find out they actually really couldn't afford me, and I was actually overdoing their books. And I was like, "Where's my paycheck at least?" I was like, "Here's your check." I was like, "Okay, cool."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And at least they were sincere about that, giving my paycheck.
Right. 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 Yeah. So I mean,
That's
like,
nice.
what do you do when you have a paycheck but you have no work? Like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, that's what's like. Put in savings,
Yeah.
or that just goes to not promoting alcohol or anything like that. That's kind
No.
of
No.
where it went,
Right.
and
It's what. Listen, all you kids out there. Adults do have this fund, and you will have one maybe when you are an adult, if that's a particular direction you want to go down in your life. You don't have to. There's an entire generation of people who have chosen to not do that, which is very interesting to me. They're a generation younger than me. I come from the generation that had a beer money fund. So there you go, kids. I don't recommend that for you right now.
stock. You buy stock in barrels, right?
Anyway.
So and then and then I got out. Again, I got out in 2012, and then went
Yeah.
into a couple of months down the road, and I got a call that a friend of mine was testing for his fourth degree black belt in Aikido,
Okay.
and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go and dive into, like, go watch and go support. It was a lot of fun, and then I'm just sitting there. Granted, I didn't stop training.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing our own variations, and everyone in my platoon were a bunch of fighters and a bunch of psychopaths when it came to striking and everything else. It was awesome, great time. Kind of helped me when I reminded me, goes, I got some areas to work on, just like
Right.
everybody does.
Everybody does.
Being a cocky, arrogant teenager coming in, turning into an adult, gets humbled real fast.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, hit someone with the planet,
Mm-hmm.
precisely.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. We're gonna talk
So
more about that. We're gonna talk more about that this
in a
week.
minute, yeah. So a lot of fun, right?
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
lot of so before I dive into my ADHD kicks in on that one.
I'm gonna try to
So
keep you on course here during the course of our conversation here today. But okay, no, it's fine. We have a wide ranging conversation.
yeah.
Yeah. So you're
So
watching Kikido, you're watching these guys, you're going, I need more of that. And
well,
how did you
it was
dump out to like what
so
you're doing now?
it was so crazy, because it was just like I started remembering all the katas. I started remembering all the little details with the katana, the tonfa, the rote
Hmm.
kama, the size going into the process with the weapons, and then you got the Filipino arts as well when it comes to the collie stick training, single and double stick training, and everything else. Then to the hapkido joints, because kakido's everything, right?
Hmm.
Because it's a striking grappling art. So it goes anything between kickboxing, hapkido, judo, wrestling, and jujitsu. It's literally everything.
Okay.
Except it's formatted into uh, traditional styles. And that's what I try when I explain to people, is like, oh, you don't do like cage fight, UFC stuff. Well, I get this hand motion for some reason
Yeah, yeah,
every
you get
time.
the
It never fails. I always get this hand motion. You're like, doing the old Austin Powers,
right.
Judy chop. It's like, ah.
Or what's his name? Ben Stiller in Dodgeball. He did the exact same thing.
He's like,
Yeah. Oh yeah. All the time. Yeah.
he's like, come here.
How dare you make me bleed my own blood?
Nobody makes me bleed my own blood. Nobody.
It is the 18th anniversary of Globo Gym blowing a 4-game lead in dodgeball to lose to Average
Shut up.
Joe's
No, it
gym.
is not.
Yes, it is. It is on my Facebook page if you want to go check it out. Yes, it is.
Oh my God. All
18
right.
years. It's been a while. It's been a while. And by the way, that was on ESPN, the Ocho if it's a sport, if it's almost a sport, we have it.
Now, because of this podcast today, we will have a dodgeball league.
Yeah. There's gonna be that's now coming out of the woodwork.
So it's so crazy.
God.
But yeah, go right back to
Brixton
it. Right?
and George are gonna have something to say about that. Two of them. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
For a fact, one's gonna be more confusing,
right?
Because of the comments and
yes,
teenager. And then you have the other one that's just a blunt adult.
Right.
There's
yeah.
Very cutthroat, very cursed, just like, you see this phone? You now die.
You now die. Duck, dip, dodge.
Dive,
dodge.
Dodge again.
Dodge again. Oh my God.
You can dodge a controller.
Yeah. You can dodge a ball. Oh my God.
I picked up, so I got back into training. A couple months down the road, I got back into it. Talked to Grandmaster about me coming back.
Yeah.
And him and I worked some stuff out to where he was actually wanting me to come back again to teach, because I started actually teaching aspect. I started when I was 11 as a red belt.
Oh wow.
And so I was teaching. I was actually, my primary class I ran, which was actually the 3 to 6 year olds.
Okay.
So. And that was my primary class. And then me being young and flexible and very power yoga.
Oh, yeah.
When we did warm-ups and everything else, I was that kid that was in the old Taekwondo classes that was like, all right, guys, 10-minute warm-ups, yoga.
Oh, yeah. We all loved you back in the day.
Fun fact, I actually had a couple of adults going, he's not running class, is he? Like he's not running class.
Yeah. And your instructor was like, I don't understand English.
He's over here going, he's a red belt. You're blue belt.
Right.
Fall in line.
Get in line.
You're not going to say anything to a Korean Marine.
Right. No, God, no. No, forget that.
So,
no.
And then so about a year later, going into that, April of 2013, he came up to me, because he was dealing with cancer with his wife, which she lately passed. Regrettably, she passed actually this past year. Oh, wow. And so she was ongoing battles with cancer, and cancer was a really big thing in her family, on her side of the family, right? So going into that wheel, I would always tell him, like, hey, Grandmaster, let me take over at least a couple of classes that we could spend more time. Because at the time he lived in Coppell, which was 3 hours from here. So he would actually commute from Coppell to Granbury.
Wow. Okay.
Daily.
Yeah.
So it was like he'd leave and then he'd drive to Coppell.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that's brutal.
Yeah. And then it came on to the point to where he actually would save gas. He actually had a back area to where he had a pallet to where he would sleep at and everything else. And I was like, I live here. Let me help. Yeah. And then he approached me with taking over. At the time, it was branded as Cam's Black Belt Academy. And it was, and that's what originally it was called. And then he came up to me about in April 2013 to take over. I go, sure. I didn't think about it was going to be at the end of the summer.
Right. You weren't like, oh, you meant right now. Yeah.
And then he said it came out to the point. He's like, we're not going to mention this to everybody because, you have experience in the martial art world as well. Oh, yeah. Going into where if people find out that there's going to be a change of hands, they're going to immediately like dip out and they'll wait for that original instructor to open up another location or go somewhere else, which is sad. But I get it. It's in the imprinting of the personality of that type of instructor that people flock to. And then,
I also think it's a weird form. Well, not weird, but I think it's a dynamic form of loyalty, which, I mean,
that's exactly what it is. It's loyalty.
Yeah. Well, and Lee talks about it in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. I mean, and Musashi talked about it in the Book of Five Rings. We read Dr. Forrest Morgan's book, Living the Martial Way, which you might actually enjoy reading.
Heard of
That
that?
book.
Yeah, I
Oh
haven't
yeah.
ever read it yet, but I've
Oh,
heard of it.
it's
Going, huh.
oh, it's weird. It was published like 35, almost 35 years ago now, and it's
Dude,
reached the
that's
level of being like it's reached the level of being like Sun Tzu's like Art of War, in like people who know martial arts, like they recommend this book. It's like
hmm
in the top 5 of most recommended books.
yeah.
But anyway,
That's
he
crazy
talks.
because you think about it now. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
like talk about it now. Like there's all these old books that were written, and all of a
Yes,
sudden they're starting to surface, and you're going
right.
like, we've been here.
Right, exactly, we've been around. Well, and he talks about, he talks about loyalty, he talks about doctrine, he talks about this idea of how the student and teacher need to engage with each other and what that actually looks like. And he kind of focuses a little bit on that in the spirituality part of, or not spirituality, the religious, or maybe more psychological, I
It's
guess,
more
parts of
more
his
along the
book.
lines of the yeah, but the psychological piece to it
Yeah,
because Bruce Lee was very adamant about staying away
correct.
from religion,
That's right.
being on or in the academy, which
Yeah,
religion and politics, which that's anywhere
right,
between
right.
any backstory, but yeah, so I took over the academy in 2013, and which I'm surprised I'm not too ADHD today. Going right into uh, going right in. I took over, and then just like anywhere else, I found out there was a couple bad eggs, and
Mm-hmm.
it was not the environment I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then going right into it, when I got done, at least it's about a month later, by the time I got done, I started with 45. And by the time I found out who all the bad eggs, who were the cancer, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, of it was just bad for business. People with very horrible people skills that, that refuse to actually abide by the rules. There was a couple people of certain law incriminations
Mm-hmm.
that weren't, just certain things that weren't supposed to be there. And
Sure.
we asked, politely and
Yeah.
the nicest way to leave and
Right.
not come back.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's also
if
a
you want,
business. I mean, it's also a business.
yeah,
Like, I mean, let's be real here. Um, Bruce Lee and I think Morgan and Sun Tzu and Musashi, I think they would agree if they were, sitting in on this conversation, sort of a round table kind of thing. It's not just, yes, you have to be a warrior across your life, right?
mm-hmm.
And you apply that warrior mentality, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But you apply that warrior mentality to everything you do in your life. Great, cool. And like, there's some things that are family, and there's some things that are personal, and there's some things that are business, and clear. I won't say clear compartmentalization, but clear understanding of what is necessary to make each one of those things work, and
Right.
applying that mindset of a warrior to that mindset, or the doctrine. That's really what it is. The doctrine of a warrior to this area is
Mm-hmm.
the thing that we want clarity on, right? And if the business is going to run and scale and work, which, I mean, we're a leadership podcast. Most of the people who we talk to are in the workplace. They're in businesses. Some of them are even running businesses. Like,
Yeah.
you got to get rid of the bad apples. You just have to. It doesn't matter if you're teaching people to kick or punch, or whether you're teaching people to sell apples. I don't care which one it is. You got to get the people out.
Well, especially if they are bad for business, and
Right.
they're bad for business, you got to get rid of them.
You
You
got
got
to
to fire them.
right.
Yeah. So yeah, I took it over, and then at the time it was Taekwondo, but we found out that I found out later it was actually Kikido. So
Okay.
it was a very weird stipulation that it kicked off because Grandmaster Kim was with the Federation of the AKF Federation, or American Kikido Federation,
Okay.
and going with that. And so at their time, about a couple years later, I met with the president, which is also my now instructor,
Okay.
Master B, going with that, which I'm not going to go into even more details than that. But it's, I found out what Kikido is and everything else, because it was like, oh, that's this Taekwondo with the fairy flare. I was like, there's more to this than Taekwondo, but okay. Because you got Taekwondo, you got the guys doing the
Yeah.
spaghetti arms.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get hated on in this. Is like, don't talk crap about Taekwondo. It's like, look, Taekwondo is efficient and powerful in its atmosphere.
I did Taekwondo for many years. I have a second degree black belt in Taekwondo, and that was many years ago.
Yeah.
And it's fine.
Which we talk about that. We talk about
we
a
talk
lot
about that all the
too.
time. Yeah.
And it just goes right into, it's like, all right, I'm not gonna do a leaning front. I'm not doing a leaning front thrust kick
Right.
like that from here. I'm gonna hit you with a teep, and
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and you know, it's you know, it's if you're okay, schools, right? This is again something that Bruce Lee was opposed to schools. That's why he wrote the Tao Jeet Kune Do, which was sort of his, if you will, last word on this idea of schools and doctrines and loyalty and just how far you can go. And this leads into another question, which I'm going to ask you later on in the podcast about UFC. But like, you know, well, you know, we're going to talk about that too. But like, we're going on record. We're going on record everywhere today. But it's, you can't be, you have to do what works.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there are going to be certain things that you like, right? Certain things that you're more capable of doing in a self-defense, or even in an offense, which we almost never talk about that part, but in a self-defense or an offensive interaction, there are going to be more things that you are going to do, and there's certain things you're going to do that you're naturally comfortable with.
Yep.
So I'm tall and thin. I am naturally comfortable with keeping you 10 feet away from me because I don't want to get on the ground. I think you and I have talked about this. I really don't want to get on the ground, and I really want to just like pepper you up. As Dave Chappelle would say, I want to pep you up a little bit, and then I want to run away. That's all I need to do. I'm a rope-a-doper by nature.
Right.
And that's where it took me like 10 years to get into jiu-jitsu, because I was just like, I don't.
It's a mentality too.
Getting on the ground is not, no. So that's something I'm comfortable with. And I had to go through a whole bunch of other different experiences to be able to get comfortable with that. So anyway.
I was the same way growing up. I was primarily just striking and throwing it and takedowns from between wrestling and judo.
Right.
And I hated the concept of being on the ground. And my mentality changed when I was in the Marine Corps. There was a handful of people in there that that I was like, all right. And then they beat the crap out of me because they knew how to defend it.
Right.
So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to.
Well, yeah. And you can't be hidebound. Again, this is something that Bruce Lee talks about, right? And we're going to read pieces from this, but you can't be hidebound to a particular, doctrine. You got to be open to everything. Like you got to figure out what the holes in your game are, and then you got to plug those holes,
Absolutely.
That's just it. So cool. All right. Well, that's the history. That's the background. That's the long journey of Josh Poland to today. And 10 years later, he's now an overnight success. So, I mean, there you go. Or at least becoming.
We talked about that last time. Everything started to come into fray. Because like for me, like we got a huge black belt listing coming up in April.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, you're in a spot where, and talk for folks who maybe don't do martial arts at all, or don't understand like the martial sports, or like, oh, my 12-year-old has a black belt. Like, okay.
All right. Well, you got
kind of explain to them kind of what does it actually mean to be engaged with the martial practices. So you have beyond just like maybe this is a gym thing that I do to keep fit. Like we're going beyond that.
So for me, I explain to my students, and you've heard me talk to our basic level, our intermediate level, our black belt, advanced and black belt students, to where it's like, look, you have the layer of an onion, right? And the very top is your bases and your foundations, and then when you start going and peeling a layer off, you're looking at 6 to 8 months to get ready for that intermediate level, right? You have an understanding what's going on. And it's like, oh, is that foundation? Like that's like you just created the line of understanding how to throw a kick, how to do a punch, how to do a block, right? And then looking into that, and which for me, we of course we focus and incorporate a lot, not incorporate, a lot of the Taekwondo, how to do a high shield, mid shield, how to block, and everything else into the Thai series versus traditional Taekwondo. Keep it in that. We don't do horse dances anymore. But we're just going, you're in that guard stance, having your hands open, you're working on going here. I explain with my students is like, you're not, I mean, yeah, but this is a stronger shield versus me coming out here because I could lose my power by just doing this, right? I'm going right here. They're trying to grab me and I'm blocking them.
Right.
Or I'm blocking them this way. So I'm saying within inside that realm of what I can do from there. But everything's in layers, right? So let's take a video game logic.
Yeah.
All right. So this is probably the best ways to go on top of the onion philosophy because it's like ogres are like layered, right? Ogres are like onions, right? So coming into the process, when they first start, they got to get their foundation, and then they start getting a level 3 understanding with their footwork and hand technique in the intermediate, and then with the pattern, advanced. Now they're having another layer on top of that. So we're right around the level 6, level 7. And when we get black belt, people, my instructor and him and I agree on this philosophy. When you become a black belt, and it depends on the age too, and on the understanding of the individual. You have a basic understanding on how to defend yourself against someone that doesn't know what the crap they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
First degree to second degree, because it takes, you know what, and people is like, oh, build factories, make those. Like, look, you have to understand, like, these systems were built to actually layer and actually be able to layer it, right, and scale it. There we go. That's just like, oh, it's eluding me, but everything's scalable, right? As we talk about the board breaks, as everyone's like, oh, look. It's always break. Bruce Lee said that too. He goes, boards don't hit back. No, you're not wrong. However, I'm teaching you to learn how to do a follow through, how to create commitments.
Right.
And follow through my commitment.
Yep.
So when you're a black belt, secondary black belt's next.
Yep.
And now you're learning on how to go into that next layer of defending yourself against someone that kind of knows what they're doing. And I'll switch this over here in a minute to jiu-jitsu logic real quick.
Oh yeah.
And the third degree goes against someone like, okay, I have an understanding of how to defend myself. Completely can defend myself against people that don't know what they're doing, like the crazy spazzy white belts.
Yeah.
And then you got a second degree going into, okay, well, I have an understanding of someone that somewhat did like 6 years of boxing.
Right.
Okay, I can parry, go over here, kick him, shin kick him, whatever, and keep him at distance or take him down to the ground and control. So to me, that's equivalent to a blue belt. Now, I'm not saying our secondary black belts are equivalent to blue belts in jiu-jitsu.
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
But the concept is the same, right? Because what you go through in a jiu-jitsu concept, it's about a year. It's about a year and about a year and some change, depending on the academy. It can be anywhere between a year to 2 years, maybe minimum. By IPJJF standards, you're looking at least a minimum of a year, right? Going into being warranted the ability to become a blue belt. That doesn't mean it's all purely based on speculation for instructors. So everything is by layers and scales. And so you can typically go into that fourth degree, like from third to fourth degree. Where I'm at, I'm a fourth degree black belt. So I'm working on my fifth degree, which, that's coming very soon for me, and working on how to be a master of my style and my art. But what does the term title of master actually mean? It means I'm a master of myself and what I do. That doesn't mean that I'm the master of everything. I'm a jack of all trades. Is essentially what it comes down to it. And that's what I really love about our art, because it's a jack of all trades. And everything, and you can always go down that rabbit hole for it. And that's what people need to understand when it comes to, don't get me wrong, there are those that have a mentality of, I will pay for my belt and you will give it to me. Okay. No, not with me at least.
Right.
And It is a business. Yes, it is a business going into a source of revenue. But, with my academy, we look at it to where you're paying for the belt promotion. However, I'm not guaranteeing them a spot right now. It's my job to get them there, but it's also them as far as teaching to get them prepared for that next level of belting.
Well, and let's be real. Like, the fact of the matter is, you started at what, like 8 on this path?
Or
Yeah,
you start at 7 at
7.
least.
Okay, well, no, you personally as an
Oh,
instructor. I mean, you started at like 7, 8 years old, right? Like
I started when I was.
your dad was like, "Hey, let's get you into something."
So for me, again, it was different for me back then because back then they didn't have
But even so,
little pre-Ks. But I started
but even so,
very young.
okay, but like, okay, let's take a random age, right? If you start at uh okay, 7, let's say 7. Take out the
Yeah,
pre stuff, whatever. Okay, that's basically running around, whatever. Okay, take out all that. You're kind of getting yourself oriented. You kind of have a little control over your body. 7, 8 years old. Okay, 7 to your mid 30s. We live in a purely transactional society, an increasingly purely transactional society, right? But there's no possible way that if I am a parent coming in to pay for my kid to get a quote unquote black belt, if I have that mentality, because I want a status symbol around my kid's waist, because it's
hmm
actually not about my kid, it's about me, but we'll leave that aside for just a minute. There's no possible way I can pay you enough to cover all those years of knowledge. There's just no possible way I can do it. There's not. There's just no way. All the things that you've learned and that you've forgotten, all of the things that you have, once you've forgotten them, learn them again. And I'm not even throwing the Marine Corps stuff in there. Let's just toss all that out. Let's just chuck all that just for
Yeah.
a second, right? Forget all that. Just that stuff right there. There's no possible way that if I have my kid's going to get a belt because this is a belt factory mentality, there's no possible way that I should be, not possible way. There's no reason for me to have a reasonable expectation of any kind at all on any planet that I would be able to pay enough to be able to justify that transaction occurring. There's just no possible way I could come up with that amount of money. We wouldn't accept that in any other field. We wouldn't accept that from a person who does fine dining. I'm a big fan of the show Chef's Table on
Mm.
Netflix. It is a great show, great photography. Even if you don't like fine dining, just watch this show. It's not a waste of your time because you realize that these chefs have been working on being chefs since they were like 8, and the reason they're charging you $350 to $500 a plate is because A, it's their reputation on the line,
Mhm.
and B, that's a minuscule amount of the compensation that they have to receive and that, quite frankly, they're owed for the fact that it was hard to figure out how to make food taste good. Because
Mhm.
everybody thinks they can do it. Everybody thinks they can cook like a Michelin 4-star chef. And the fact of the matter is, no, actually, you can't. You haven't spent the 30 years. You just didn't. And so I get irritated with the belt factory idea because just if you're just looking at it at a rational level,
Mhm.
it makes no sense. We do not tell the carpenter who's putting together, or the construction worker, not carpenter, the construction worker who's putting together your house. We don't go, oh, I'm just going to lowball you on the XYZ because like your 30 years doesn't matter. No, we don't say any of that. But we do for the arts, or we do for things that we consider to be, at least in America,
Mhm.
we don't consider to be that quote unquote valuable. When am I going to actually have to like defend myself? Or as I saw, I'm part of this group on Facebook, and we'll go back to the book in just a second here, but I'm part of this group on Facebook called Jiu-Jitsu Over 40. If you ever have an opportunity to go look at that group, it's a mess in there. But anyway.
I'm a member.
Yo, you're okay, so then you know.
I'm not 40, but
I suspect you.
I actually typed it in, and then they were like, "How old are you?" I go, "32." Why?
Why?
And I was like, "I just want to be a part of the
Yeah,
conversation."
it's a part of the conversation. Yeah, just let me in. No, get out. Get out, youngin. But like there was a whole thread in there the other day, talking about oh gosh, the whole dynamic of, I haven't been trained to fight, but I can beat anybody up if I need to beat anybody up. Like, I'll
Yeah.
just go red line, dude, you don't know me. And I'm like, okay, first off, if you've been trained to fight, and I don't comment on much of anything in that thing. I use it for resources and then I move on. And usually there's only like 2 resources a week and then I'm done. Like everything else is just nonsense in there, like most Facebook groups. But looking at that statement, and I've heard that before, by the way, like, please, heard that before. And it's, by the time you get your black belt, and this is going to sound counterintuitive to people who are listening, by the time you get your black belt in any warrior type structure, whether it's a Do based one or an Utsu or a San based one, right? It doesn't matter what structure you're getting it in. Hell, I'll even go as far as Tai Chi. You leave those people alone. I've said that before. Leave the Tai Chi people alone. They're not.
You do let them.
Feckless. Just let them slide.
You let them be themselves and let them this life.
That's right. That's right. Just leave them be.
Those dudes are secret and squirrel assassins.
Those people are dangerous. Don't be fooled. Don't be fooled.
You got an 85-year-old man doing the exact splits and everything else. You're going, that dude's a rubber band.
That guy's hardcore, and I'm walking over here.
I'm gonna go.
I'm out. Peace out. If you've reached a black belt in any system, and I loved how you framed it, the beginning of understanding. The beginning of understanding is not a white belt. The beginning of the understanding is that quote unquote black belt, that quote unquote status. The thing you have learned is, and again, this is going to sound counterintuitive, folks, the thing you've learned is how not to fight. That's the biggest thing you've learned. You've learned what not to do. You learned don't do this. Yes, that's right. You spent 12 years and, I don't know, I'll name a number, $50,000 to learn how to not fight. Mm-hmm. Yep. Welcome. Yes, that's exactly right. That's what you did. That's what you spent 10 years doing.
Well, it's the same thing for jiu-jitsu, right? You go into the process. It's just like, for me, I've been doing it for 10 years.
Right.
And it's just going into the process of, nah.
Right.
My wife asked me that. She goes, what are you worried about? It's like, how do you feel if someone tried to get? I was like, I'm not really worried about that person.
Right.
2, I have to keep my shelf in check because, I can control me.
Right.
But if you cross a check mark in my moral compass box,
mm-hmm.
you're now going to start playing with my death row temper.
Yeah, but there's other escalations in there too. Like, we're not going to go directly from like
that's 15. We just went to 15.
Right. It's not like we're going to go from like you bumped me to ultra violence. Like this is not a Clockwork Orange, right? This isn't that movie. Like we're not going to go to like kicking people in the face immediately. No, it's okay. You know what? Now we're done. Mm-hmm. And please go away over there and leave me alone. Like, and this is what people who don't have a warrior mindset, who merely have a status mindset, or even worse, have a mindset of I'll do whatever the hell I want, or, and this is the worst mindset possible, and we've seen this most recently with the school shooting that's in the news. Everybody can go look at that. I'll just call the cops and they'll show up and everything will be fine.
I'm just gonna say this one thing.
I'm not talking about any of that.
There's this one thing about that. Y'all have to keep in mind. There are good apples, there are bad apples, and there's going on to the point to where they're not Superman.
Correct. That's right. And
that's all I'm gonna say on it.
Yep. And
that's such a controversial conversation. It's just like,
well, and the more we peel back from that, the more failures you see at a systemic level. And the bureaucratic system is a bit of a problem there. Actually, it's the largest piece of that puzzle there that is the problem. But anyway, the average person, this is who I'm talking to, the average person, right? The leadership skills you learn on that 10-year journey, where you're spending your $50K to learn from Josh, or, I mean, I taught people back in the day, like, when I started teaching people at blue belt level, something like that in Taekwondo, because I was upright and I wasn't stupid, and like I kind of knew a little bit of it.
It was structured different too back then. It was structured different too.
It was structured different, right? Exactly. So like, Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'll teach people. And honestly, that was really good because it required me to give back, which is what teaching in any system does. You have to pay it forward. And actually, you learn more by paying it forward than even you learn from the instructor, and it becomes a virtuous circle. But anyway, that's a whole other thing for another day.
That's
But
another one.
yeah. That's a whole other podcast. But the point is, like, you're going to pay inside of that system, and the things that you are going to learn are going to be worth 10, okay, 5, 10, 20x whatever it is you invested. And so, if you're looking for your kid to be a black belt at like 12, you got to slow down. Like, you got to ask, like, what are you actually wanting your kid to do with that? And of course, have you appropriately organized your ego yet?
Well, that goes on to the point to understanding structure.
Right.
For yourself.
Exactly. Which, back to the book. Which is the whole point of us being here.
30-minute tangent.
30-minute tangent. And now we're going to go back to Bruce Lee because he's sitting over in the corner tapping his foot.
Pulling a Sonic.
Exactly. In the long history, so organized despair. Back to the book, Tao of Jeet Kune, page 14 and 15, organized despair. In the long history of martial arts, the instinct to follow and imitate seems to be inherent in most martial arts instructors and students alike. This is what we were just talking about. This is partly due to human tendency, and partly because of the steep traditions behind multiple patterns of styles. Consequently, the need to find a refreshing original master teacher is a rarity. The need for a pointer of the way echoes. Let me pause here for just a second. I came out of the arts, and one of the biggest things in art is this continual navel-gazing pursuit of being original. It's also in the arts. You're never going to be original. Everybody's a derivative of somebody else. Everybody's doing derivations of multiple things, and it's fine. Being original is really hard, and most people are not original, myself included. Most people are not original. They are doing copies of copies of copies of copies, and it's fine. This is what Lee is talking about. Finding a fresh original master teacher is a rarity. And this was written in like the 1960s, 1970s. The need for a pointer of the way echoes. I love that. You don't actually need an original. You need somebody to go, that's what you need to look at. That's the point of this podcast. Look at that. That's all I'm doing. I'm not doing anything original here. There's other leadership development podcasts that are floating around that I'm sure if you're listening to them, they're doing the same thing. Point the way. This is the thing you need to look at. Turn your attention to this thing. And that's what Josh does in his teaching of Kikido and in Jiu-Jitsu. This is what I do on the podcast and through training and development work and books and all of that. It's pointing the way. And this is what Bruce Lee was talking about.
Yeah, this would go on to the point too. Is I would just say this real fast. It just goes, it's not right. It's not wrong. It's different.
Right.
And that's okay.
That's right. Back to the book. Each man belongs to a style which claims to possess truth to the exclusion of all other styles. These styles become institutes with their explanations of the way, dissecting and isolating the harmony of firmness and gentleness, establishing rhythmic forms as the particular state of their techniques. Instead of facing combat in its suchness, then, most systems of martial art accumulate a fancy mess that distorts and cramps their practitioners and distracts them from the actual reality of combat, which is simple and direct. Instead of going immediately to the heart of things, flowery forms, organized despair, and artificial techniques are ritualistically practiced to simulate actual combat. Thus, instead of being in combat, these practitioners are, I love this, doing something about combat. And I wrote here as a note in my copy of the Tao of Jeet Kune, the Gracies would agree, I think, with that. I think Helio Gracie would. I think Helio would agree with that a lot, actually.
The Gracies are on a different plateau.
They are on a different plateau
when it comes to business mindset. Now there's and a martial art mindset as well. Now there's a handful of them that are right there with them.
Yeah,
but that's because they grew up with them. So, and there's a lot of people that would easily catch flack. I'll catch flack for this, but it's just one of those things to where this is just me personally, because I'm part of the under Shanji Hebrew, the Sixth Place Foundation. When it comes down into it, it's a whole different type of jujitsu when you look at it personally. Versus you got the Pedro Sours, you got the Machados, you have the Gracies. But I think when it comes to really, when it comes to a teaching format and understanding arts, Gracie's and the Hebrews have got it made. They got it made in the shade when it comes down to it. And then, and Machado, he is on a different spectrum as a whole, on a different entirely. And a lot of people go, I don't like Machado. Or there was like, oh, I love Machado's. Hey, tomato. You called it tomato, I called it tomato. It's like a three.
Yep.
If you do this, you see a W, I see an M.
Right.
They see an E, I see a 3. You know what I mean? So the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. The answer to the question is yes. Well, and it's this idea of, are we doing combat? Are we doing something about combat, or are we being in combat? Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, those three that you mentioned, they are being in combat. And I think that, again, that's what Dr. Morgan was talking about in Living the Martial Way. It's that doctrinal mindset that people have to have that I think is sorely lacking in most individuals who are walking through a quote-unquote martial arts program. And don't get me wrong, if you want to do it for fitness or you want to do it for whatever, that's fine. But it should, and you have a sign on in your school that basically indicates that this is more than just something that you show up and, as Bruce Lee would say, more than something you just show up and do. This is something that you be, something that you are. It has to seep into your being. Mm-hmm. And once you start doing that, then you start pulling apart this organized despair. Back to the book for just a moment. Stylists, instead of looking directly into the fact, cling to forms or theories and go on entangling themselves further and further, finally putting themselves in an inextricable snare. They do not see it in its suchness because their indoctrination is crooked and twisted. Discipline must conform to the nature of things in their suchness. Maturity does not mean to become a captive of conceptualization. It is the realization of what lies in our most inner selves. When there is freedom from mechanical conditioning, there is simplicity. Life is a relationship to the whole. The man who is clear and simple does not choose. What is. Action based on an idea is obviously the action of choice, and such an action is not liberating. On the contrary, it creates further resistance, further conflict. I love this. Assume pliable awareness. Relationship is understanding. It is a process of self-revelation. Relationship is the mirror in which you discover yourself. To be is to be related. Set patterns, incapable of adaptability, of pliability, only offer a better cage. Truth is outside of all patterns.
It hits you in a different way when you say it out loud, too. It hits you in a different way.
It does.
If you're actually listening to the words, if you just go like this, it's like, you're like, bro, close your mouth.
Close your mouth. Just slack your jaw. You're not getting it. Well, and so I'm naturally peripatetic, right? Like I've done a lot of different things. If you go and look at my LinkedIn profile, I'm kind of all over the map, and that's actually been a piece of feedback that people have given me. And this is partially because I get bored easily. You talk about having ADHD. Dude, I've just professionalized it. That's all I did. I just professionalized my ADHD. That's all.
That's why you and I are really close friends, because we go into the greater than equal to less than concept, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. I had to build a structure. I had to build a container. I could dump it all in and be okay and still make money. Mm-hmm. And like that was the thing. But Bruce Lee's mind did the same thing, and he ranged the same way around combat, covering everything from Wing Chun to Western boxing. He wasn't locked into one style or fighting mode. And as a matter of fact, he believed in being fluid, not only in any approach to combat, but again, this goes to his mindset, right? In an approach to anything, right? as Josh just said, the answer is yes. Doesn't matter what the question is. The answer is yes. Lee believed that in chaotic self-defense situations, the person who was going to win needed to do what actually worked. And that's just like in leadership, by the way. Philosophy and strategy matter more than forms and tactics. And what's interesting is, after reading Living the Marshall Way for the podcast, kind of really come alongside this idea of the difference between doctrine, strategy, and tactics, where doctrine is really mindset. Like the Marine Corps has a doctrine, but a doctrine is not to be confused with a tactic. You know, the doctrine is, well, the Marine Corps model, let's go with that, right? Mm-hmm. That's the doctrine, the Marine Corps history. That's the doctrine, right? The bridge between doctrine and tactics, though, and by the way, tactics is you're going to use this gun at this spot on this hill, and you're going to shoot that guy, and you're going to do it until I tell you to stop. That's a tactic. That's not a doctrine, right? The link between those two is strategy, and this is something that Forrest Morgan was very clear about, and Lee is clear about in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, when he talks about that bridge over to other things. And this is something that I've really also gotten my arm around, and this is why leaders need to get out of the office and get out to do stuff that has nothing to do with whatever it is they're doing in the office.
Right.
I found this with jiu-jitsu. So I'm starting to really, and by the way, I'm going to say this publicly, thank you for encouraging all of us to go get a freaking journal and start writing all this stuff down. Because this is what I tell my clients to do. Like when you said it and my face went, because I go, oh yeah, that's what I tell my clients to do. And they never do it. Mm-hmm. and then, which I guess, you know, is fine, because then they pay me more for coaching, or they buy my books, or they buy more training or whatever, because it hasn't embedded, right? But if you want something to embed, you have to reflect on it. You have to journal. You have to write it in. I mean, I was doing this the other day, and interestingly enough, Brickson came by, and that's a student in the thing. I'll just leave it at that. But he came by, and he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm writing things down. And he's like, oh, you do that? I was like, yes, that's kind of the point. I was like, you should probably write things down too. But that's how you get that bridge. That's how you grow that bridge between doctrine, which I'm sort of kind of beginning to wrap my head around in jiu-jitsu, and then the tactics, which is the fire hose that we're just thrown at us, which is fine. But there's got to be a bridge between those two, and it's got to be strategy. And the only way I could figure out to make that bridge was to reflect, was to journal, was to grow in self-awareness.
Well, what you think and what you write is what you help verbalize your own expectations by writing it down. Right. So the concept going into is like, I think it, you ink it. Mm-hmm. So when you think that, because I was stretching out and I was getting ready to, because we were doing Pahada with one of the guys. I was doing Pahada with one of the guys, and I see in the corner my he's going, ugh! And whatever. He goes, hey, what's this I do? Oh, he's trying to step down. Come here.
Well, and it doesn't always have to be. So jiu-jitsu is one of those martial practices, combat practices. I don't want to use martial, combat practices, that the more days you go, the better you become. Like that's, I got that like literally right off the bat. But if you are living a life that does not allow you to do that, then you have to figure out, on the path to being a better combatant at this thing, you're going to have to figure out what are the strategies to get you to being better while preserving the overall doctrine of your life. And I don't want to make this any more complicated than it sounds, because people are going to listen to this and they're going to go, well, you're just telling me I just need to compartmentalize. And Lee says, don't compartmentalize. Correct. Don't compartmentalize. Come up with a doctrine for your whole life. Figure out how this fits into that doctrine. And if it fits in, great. And by the way, it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. It can be Shotokan karate. It can be, I would prefer traditional taekwondo. That's what I was trained in. But okay, whatever. I'm not going to get into combat versus sport applications. But okay, Tai Chi, Wing Chun Kung Fu. We had a Wing Chun guy on, earlier this month. who talked very beautifully about that. And he did that for something like 12 or 15 years. Like, just, that's unbelievable, right? And so, whatever it is you're going to do, eventually that thing is going to start eating the rest of your life. You're going to start reprioritizing your things. You're going to start moving things around, and situations and circumstances will be created that will allow you to engage more in building that strategy bridge between the doctrine of your life and the tactic of how to punch and kick. And I think that that is what Lee is talking about here in Organized Despair, rather than just being a martial artist or being in a combat quote unquote sport. Do the thing, and
You gotta be
journaling and
proactive.
reflection helps you. Yeah, you got to be productive. Yeah, all that helps you. I talked a lot there, so I'm gonna go back to the book. gonna let Lee talk some more. I talked a lot there. I'm gonna go to page 23. We're gonna talk about the formless form in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. By the way, he does write here. I just saw this. A so-called martial artist is the result of 3,000 years of propaganda and conditioning. So I'll just leave you with that.
Oh,
Brutal, brutal.
God. Talking about hitting your heart and your soul.
The man's taking no prisoners. He's taking souls. It's taking souls.
Dude's dead, and he's still taking souls.
That's right. All right, a formless form. Please do not be concerned with soft versus firm, kicking versus striking, grappling versus hitting and kicking, long-range fighting versus infighting. There is no such thing as this is better than that. Should there be one thing we guard against, let it be partiality that robs us of our pristine wholeness and makes us lose unity in the midst of a duality. There are styles that favor straight lines, and there are styles that favor curved lines and circles. Styles that cling to one partial aspect of combat are in bondage. Jeet Kune Do is a technique for acquiring liberty. It is a work of enlightenment. Art is never decoration or embellishment. A choice method, however exacting, fixes its practitioners in a pattern. Combat is never fixed and is changing from moment to moment. Working in patterns is basically a practice of resistance. Such practice leads to clogginess. Understanding is not possible, and its adherents are never free. The way of combat is not based on personal choices and fancies. Truth in the way of combat is perceived from moment to moment, and only when there is awareness without condemnation, justification, or any form of identification. Jeet Kune Do favors formlessness so that it can assume all forms, and since it has no style, Jeet Kune Do fits in with all styles. As a result, Jeet Kune Do uses all ways and is bound by none, and likewise uses any technique or means which serves its end. In this art, efficiency is anything that scores. I wonder if he had lived a little bit longer, if he would have changed that to anything that kills. I wonder if he would have gone down that road. Or if he was still too... Well, the tournament circuit was starting to grow in America during his time. It wasn't yet quite to the level of commercialization that it is now. And this is in all forms. I mean, this is across the board, you know. And that leads into, of course, you know, thoughts that I have about UFC. Which, there was we're live streaming this on June 22nd. There was a UFC fight on Saturday. Two middleweights basically turned each other into burger. I don't know if you saw that fight. I happened to be in a establishment that served adult beverages at the time, standing at the spot where you get those adult beverages, and I happened to look up, and it was on the screen, and these two people were wailing, you know, the crap out of each other. Mm-hmm. And it's fine. They both wound up looking like burger, and then, you know, greatest fight ever. I think they're both middleweights. Best fight ever, greatest fight ever was declared. And I've mentioned this before, you know, the octagon, don't get me wrong, I don't want to step in with any of those guys. Let me give the 3 caveats. I'm not stepping into the octagon. I get it. You're athletes. Absolutely. And in a street fight, you're going to be a real problem for somebody where there's no rules. Okay. Now that we've acknowledged all of that. And maybe it's a level of inelegance. I don't know. But I look at something like UFC and I wonder what Bruce Lee would have thought about that. What do you think he would have thought about that? That whole structure.
But to where it's at now?
Yeah, the whole structure of kind of how where we've gone and evolved from UFC 1, where everybody was like, oh, to what are we like, UFC 293, 384, whatever Dana White's counting is at this point. Like I don't.
His counting doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't.
Be honest with you.
Map. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's driven purely by pay-per-view numbers.
Yeah, because there's way more than that.
Yeah.
It's so funny because we talk about that, and I refer to Bruce Lee and Jet Li, all those guys, because Bruce Lee was, in my opinion, he was the creator of mixed martial arts. He was.
Okay.
And he was you think about it, because he converted so many different things. And I was actually watching the ways of looking at the modern day Jeet Kune, and it's got throws. It's got stuff now starting to proliferate to the ground. Now it does. And back then it didn't, because that really wasn't really a thought, to try to finish the standing fight is what it was. Or if you take him to the ground, you crash him with a planet and then you just finish it. Finish him. Whack. Rip out with the predator, rip out the spine and all that stuff, right? But to answer the question, because I'm tiptoeing on it now, because it's a very good question to ask, and I personally feel that he would not disagree or agree. And I think that because of one reason, and because martial arts in the UFC, you do not have traditionalist fighters. There are only a count of maybe two hands as I'm holding them up, guys that actually have traditional backgrounds and they're coming into the cage. Now, granted, I've been asked before, by my own brothers, one of my brothers, and other people say, hey, have you thought about going into the cage? I was like, I'm good. One, I'm 32 years old, and two, I don't. If I was younger, I would. Back in my early 20s, I was like, yeah. I had an intention. Let's go over there. Let's just turn each other to mincemeat. Let's just go. This is honor. I'm gonna go to Valhalla, and when we get to Valhalla, I'm gonna kick the crap out of you again. This time we'll do it throughout the rest of the time. We're just gonna have an infinite battle. Because there's no more stamina gauge at that point.
Right. Infinite rolls.
Yeah. So just going through that. So I think it's a love-hate relationship into it. The deep political side of it, I don't think he would agree with it at all. I think the way it's going as an art, I use it word because it's really not an art. It's propaganda, and on a point of how we beat the ever-living breaks off of each other in a 5-minute span.
It's almost the perfect, and this is sort of my analysis. It's almost the perfect sports.
Before
example, go ahead.
Yeah. So you just think about how boxing is. Think about how much money they make in boxing.
Right.
If you remember the whole controversy between McGregor and Mayweather.
Yeah.
Mayweather wasn't gonna lose that fight.
No.
There was no way. McGregor, on the other hand, he had full intentions on trying to hit Mayweather, and he actually did. Right. People were like, oh no, this and that. I was like, first of all, that whole match, you agree to disagree, people. Agree to disagree. That match was scripted for Mayweather to win in reality, but they both were going to get a giant purse day.
And fundamentally, this is something that, again, this is where I go. And if you're a fan of UFC and you're yelling at me right now, either on the live stream or you're going to be yelling at me later on the video version of this, or you're going to be yelling at me on the audio version of this, you can send all of your, don't bother Josh, send all of your complaints to CEO.
Because I'm not going to answer it.
You're not going to answer any of those emails. I will answer every last one of them. I have something for everybody. And no, you can't upend me. There's no logic that you have that will upend me. You just don't have it. That's the open challenge to you. You don't have the logic. So if you're a UFC fan and you are going to, if you're Joe Rogan or whoever out there, you go right ahead. You can email me, CEO at hsconsultingandtraining.com, and I will take all of those emails. I will answer all of them. I will deal with all of it. I will shield my guest from all of the nonsense.
I purposely would love just to have a conversation because I just love listening to Joe Rogan talk, and he's one of my favorite enthusiasts to have those conversations. Right?
He's very enthusiastic. I'll grant you that. He is very enthusiastic.
He's highly smart when he's on and off, when he's a little bit out of the clouds. But
right.
And going into that, I love Joe Rogan. I love him to death. And partially, I'm super excited that he's finally in Texas where he belongs, because that's his personality.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. He should have. I don't know why he waited so long.
You're looking at it now too. You think about when UFC, to put my final stamp on what my feel about UFC is. UFC is one of those things where I've heard it so many times for people that don't know what they're looking for and they're just doing this. And by the way, this is not a White Claw, it's a Monster. So if you watch this is not me drinking a White Claw at 2:00 in the afternoon. It's me drinking a Monster. But when you're going through, I've been in a meeting before and I've done that. And they go, "Are you drinking a White Claw?" No.
Where's your brain at?
So going right into it, you think about the logistics.
Mm-hmm.
What's the coin purse? It went from not really caring about money, but it was the pride of the fight.
Right. Yeah.
And now it's an ego trip from about half. I'm gonna take a swing about half, because if you see about those promotion boards when they have the guys with the belts and everything, you got the guys that are mouthy, and then you have the ones that are not very mouthy. And that's a good handful. And I'm not up to date with UFC. I'm really not. And quite frankly, I when they go, "Oh, hey, you want to watch UFC? Sure, why not?" And then they go through, "Oh, yeah." And then you're watching it. The best person that will give it an analyst about a grappler in a UFC fight is John Danaher.
Oh, yeah, because he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, you watch John Danaher. Granted, it'll take 45 minutes, and he has the longest intros in videos, and going into that, he's going down. He's extremely intelligent. He's like PhD level, stupid nuclear physics brain, and just goes through it. And he takes 45 minutes to the first 25, 30 minutes. And everyone that's probably listening to this right now going, "Yeah, it takes a minute to get through it." But he's explaining every analytical thing you can think of, or just to go through it. It's really been, me personally too, being in a John Danaher, Gordon Ryan seminar a couple years back. And it was like, ow. That was a lot.
Yeah. He's got the best posts on Instagram for, even if you don't care about jiu-jitsu, he's got some of the best posts that are like, you're right, just pure analysis of just sort of what's actually going on here. Everything from this is how you use grips, and this is how you manipulate somebody inside of a pin or whatever, all the way to, this is how you set up a foot lock, to there's certain things that you're going to have to work on if you're, and this is where I key off on it. There's certain things you're going to have to work on if you're old, like you just are. Like there's just no way around it, right? No, Danaher has great analysis. I don't know if and maybe to somebody else who gave me some feedback recently, I like thought exercises. So Danaher is fine for me. Like it's fine.
Oh yeah, if you don't have the mental capacity, and you know what about this is a good sprawn of the world that do not have the mental capacity to actually just sit through a John Danaher
Oh yeah.
lecture.
Oh yeah. No.
You really don't, because you have to be, one, you have to understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Two, you have to understand that the mindset is not a I'm gonna beat you into a hamburger meat mentality. It's a well thought out, educated conversation.
Right.
And that goes right into it, to what I was saying before, because I kind of squirreled in the very beginning, but it was one of those things to where that you have a martial arts background in grappling or whatever the case may be, and you watch these fights, you go, oh my God. And the biggest controversy ever, in my opinion, when the women division, when you had against Ronda Rousey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ronda Rousey was the best at what she did at the time. And she didn't purposely stay away from strikers. She just she exposed strikers to the understanding of the weakness of being thrown by judo and getting hit with that infamous freaking throw she does or did. And I'm a huge Ronda Rousey fan.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes right into the point to where an actual striker, it is even said, an actual striker that was primarily striking base, aka Holly Holmes, was going to pick her apart. And it was even said, like, if she does not do something about that striking, she's going to get picked apart. And quite frankly, that whole controversy, that camp failed her. That whole coaching camp failed Ronda Rousey to get her actually prepared for that fight. Personal opinion.
Well, and that's so, but that goes directly into the thing you just said about politics, right? And this is a leadership podcast. There's politics everywhere, right? There's politics in politics. We leave that alone. That's for another kind
We're
of
not
podcast.
touching that.
We're not touching that. But there's politics in leadership. There's politics in working at on the factory floor. There's politics in your neighborhood. There's politics in your family. There's politics in a coaching environment, around a fighter. And so there's all these layers, right?
Or there's politics in animal care.
Right. Well, anywhere where there are going to be human beings that are going to have two different opinions, there's going to be politics. I mean, that's just it. We're done, right? I mean, that's the thing. And so when you look at MMA and when you look at sports that have been corrupted by the money, to Josh's point, by the money, like boxing, which 30 years ago got corrupted by the money. Like it just did. Like the last decent boxing match that I saw was one of the last, and I'm talking like pre-Evander Holyfield, one of the pre-Evander Holyfield Mike Tyson fights, like back when Tyson was like in his prime, like back in the late 80s. That's probably the last pure boxing match where Tyson didn't care about the money because that wasn't the driver for him. When you look at UFC, when you look at most, even amateur MMA fights, right? Like I'll watch amateur octagon stuff and just to pick apart techniques and things like that, just to see what people are doing. The reason you don't see any of those traditional people in there is because the traditional people are working on, the traditional practitioners are working on something else. They're working on it for the love of the game. And that's only going to take you so far. And then at a certain point, the money and the politics is going to take over, and you're going to have to make a decision, just like we were talking about in your business, just like we were talking about in my business. You're going to have to make a decision about where your ethic stands. And if your ethic doesn't stand with the money and the politics, then you're out. As far as the Ronda Rousey fight, I didn't watch that, but I did hear about it later on. I have no mind about any of this. I think fundamentally, this is a good rule for leaders. I think fundamentally, when you lay down, with demons, you're gonna get, or when you lay down with the devil, you're gonna get up with demons. Like that's just it. Like that's just how the game goes. And
that's a good way of looking at it.
You're going to get what you asked for, and part of that goes into even what Bruce Lee was talking about, in sort of how do you pull apart the thing you are doing all the way down to its component parts, and then build that thing back up into something that serves you. And that's the point of and we were just talking about black belts, or we are talking about black belts and degrees and all that. When you get your black belt, when you get your first degree black belt, that is the first step towards pulling everything apart and towards rebuilding it, which turns us the corner into, let's do a little jog into jiu-jitsu before we go back to the book. For people who have never done jiu-jitsu, explain the belt system to people, because this was one of the things that I did not understand initially when I came in and had to figure out, which is fine. I'm a smart guy. I can go research and put things together, and I have my own background experience. So I know how to relate to it. But explain why there's only like 5 belts, and how does that work in a system where, or not a system, but in a world where almost nobody is delaying gratification.
So you look at it to where everyone's as a populace, we're an instant gratification kind of culture, right? I need instant results. I need instant, thought process. I need it now. Well, that's not how it's going to work. It's like trying to do nutrition. You're just because you change your diet that day, you could see results within 2 days. You won't see results that day because your body will not show results unless you're on steroids. That's just weird. Now, I guess supposed to be even in steroids, maybe not so much. But the belt system as a whole, originally when Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu came around, there was no 5 belts. It was originally a white belt and a blue belt.
Didn't Helio Gracie get rid of his like black belt and wore a white belt for like years because he was protesting the belt system?
Yeah,
I read that somewhere. Yeah,
I've read that somewhere too. He protested it for some. There was a huge political thing that in that time. But as we started getting closer, when we started debuting, that's when he was like, okay, we need to start adding levels to kind of separate people, which that was kind of later on in the 2000s. But kind of going into that, they actually took that concept out of judo. And when they did that, that's where that concept came in. But judo has more belts than jiu-jitsu does. If you do the Kodokan, which is Kyojo Kano, Dr. Kyojo Kano is a style, right? For the judo players, it goes white, yellow, orange, green. And then it gets the 3 levels of brown belt. And then you got black belt, right? And judo. And for jiu-jitsu, you got the white, blue, purple, brown, black. Right. And then you got coral, and then you got the 2 different corals, and then you have red belt, which is the highest. So they kind of took that concept and go from there. And later on down the road, that's when they made kid belts because it wasn't scalable.
Okay.
So that's where the yellow or the gray, the yellow, the orange, and the green came in. So they pretty much took minus the gray belt. They pretty much took, and then this is my thought on it. Yeah. They took the judo belt system and they applied overlaid it with kids.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So going into that, and people are going to fact check me. Oh, no, it was on this specific day. I don't care. It is just based off of what my understanding is. You're going to give me your opinion. That's your opinion. That's fine. But really comes down to it is when you start jiu-jitsu and the belt systems, when you're a white belt, you start in the first 8 to 9 months is truly surviving.
Correct.
And and surviving goes right into and you're going through those aches and pains right now.
Oh yeah.
But when you get a new belt, you reset.
Right.
I just knocked the crap out of my microphone.
That's okay.
But
that's all right.
Later on going.
That's what it feels like to reset, by the way. Actually, that's what the first 8 to 9 months feel like. It feels like just constantly.
Every day, just hammering and hammering. But so just go right into it. I heard a podcast and a while back, and really, I completely agree with this. Chewy Jiu-Jitsu is the podcast. It was amazing going into the instructor I forget his name, but it was an amazing podcast going into it because you're looking at the first 8 to 9 months, that's your survival. But you're surviving, not the round. You're surviving on pressure. You're surviving on how to not cardio tap, how to not pressure tap, how to not, tap. Well, you're going to tap in general. That's your learning tool.
Yeah.
Right. But then you got those other concepts. And the other part is you're understanding the system.
Correct.
So when you're going into the system process, and then now you're going down that rabbit hole of, okay, Now I understand my positions. Now I can go through and I can start hitting some sweeps at this point. It's like, okay, I understand how to recover guard, how to get out of that bad position. Now I can sweep them. And then you get that exciting point. Woo, woo, I got on top. And then you get excited. You go,
And then you
I did
realize
it.
I'm on top, and then it
Oh.
doesn't matter. You're back on bottom, and you're like, "Oh crap, I'm back on bottom."
And then that there's that gratification of, aha,
Right.
how did I do that?
Yeah. How did that happen?
Then you start going right into the realm of sweeping and actually being proactive on the attack. Well, this you are now starting to separate a little bit from the white belts into the blue belt territory,
Right.
right? And this is roughly about a year and a half. And I
Yeah.
tell everyone, like, with me, about a year and a half, almost, about a little past a year to year and a half, depending on how you process everything. You're looking at the realm of blue belt with me, and that's where I look at it. And so it's not a it's a snail's pace.
Yeah.
You just take your time with it. Um, and then you're looking at the blue belt is that experimental phase, right? You're going on a journey, you're going down the road, what you really like, you kind of add on to it, what you like from here. It'd be this guard, half guard, Z guard, Delahiva, whatever, all the different, all these other different types, because of how it works with your body type is typically you're going to gravitate towards. I'm 5'6", I'm 195 pounds. So it's just one of those things where it's like, I'm not going to be playing spider guard. You know what I mean? I like Delahiva. I like single leg X. I like Ashigarami. When it comes to, I really like half guard. So half guard is one of my favorite things. And then by the time you go through this, you're in this X, you're like, you left high school, you graduated high school, now you're in college. You're in junior college, and now you're in the experimental phase. Right. And that's all I'm going to say with that.
Yeah,
You're going to keep it PG.
Got to keep it clean for the kids.
And then it's going into that point, and you're figuring things out. And then when you go in the purple belt realm, now you're at a different level now, because now you're into, okay, well, the purple belt means you are pretty much a black belt level position, black belt level attacks, because that's like your primary bread and butter. You're working on a game. This is your game. You develop the game at this point. What do you really like? Well, now you're starting to add on to what your game is. So you're focusing on your strengths while working on your weaknesses. And when you start becoming this is your journey. Now you're going really down the deeper rabbit hole, because everyone typically quits at blue belt.
Yeah, something like a 90% drop off or something like that.
Yeah, it's huge.
Blue belt and purple belt, like you mentioned, you called it what was it, the blue belt blues?
The blue belt blues, and you just go through going, and those are the guys that the instructors either are not able to verbalize their expectations well enough to that person, or they're mentally struggling because they're going to hit that wall.
Well, right. I think, and you know what? I have no idea about any of this because I'm not there. I'm still in survival mode, and dear God, I haven't done anything yet. I'm still in that space. But I look at it as, and I think it goes back to this whole delayed gratification thing. Like I don't think anybody can do it. I'll say anybody. I think the number of people who can do something that at the beginning you get a lot of claps for and you get a lot of celebration, but at the end there'll be nobody and it'll just be you. And that's a really lonely realization, is that if the black belt in jiu-jitsu is the thing you want to get, okay, fine, cool. But there's not going to be anybody clapping there at the end of that road.
Well, there will be, just in a different way.
Right. Well, yeah. and it parallels, and again, this is where I parallel it to. I parallel to entrepreneurship. When I started this business back in 2013, there was a lot of claps, there was a lot of enjoyment, there was a lot of happiness. I am 9, almost 10 years down this road now, and there's very few claps, and there's very little happiness, and there's a lot of what have you done for me lately, and what are you going to do next? Which is cool. That's fine. I think jiu-jitsu is the same way. I think it's the same parallel. And, getting your blue belt in entrepreneurship is pretty much what happens in year 3 to 4 of entrepreneurship, where you have to decide, like, am I going to scale? And if I do scale, dear God, like, this is going to suck, because you have to layer on a new challenge to yourself. And the thing in jiu-jitsu, at least what I've seen, and, again, from blue belts I've seen floating around and from folks I've talked to, I think the biggest thing is, and you can disagree with me because you've seen more of this than I have, but I think the biggest thing is, for Americans, there's no hand holding at the blue belt level. You have to figure it out on your own. Like, you are going to sink or swim with or without the instructor. And if the instructor helps you, great, cool, awesome. But if your instructor doesn't help you, it's still on you to sink or swim. And I think that if you have a mindset that is more collaborative, and more interested in sort of everybody, people are going to hate me on this, but they already hate me on the UFC thing, so what the heck, I'll go for this thing. If you have an everybody gets a trophy mindset, you're going to fall off. You just don't.
Well, yeah, and it's either going to fall off or you're going to wake up. So the biggest thing is what I love about jiu-jitsu as a whole is you either win or you learn. And that goes right to, like, for me, because I'm a brown belt, right? So where I'm at, I'm in the polish stage of just trying to figure out what I really like. Yeah. And I like hitting people on the planet. I like being on top. I like people being suffocating. Mm-hmm. I know for a fact if they're a bigger guy, I don't want them on top of me. Right. So I'm going to do everything I can to prevent them from being on top. Yep. However, you need to also indulge in those areas to where what is your strength versus what is your weaknesses, what works, what doesn't for you, and then make it yours. It's not right. Go back to the very beginning. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's different. It's okay. Because what you do in your journey for jiu-jitsu is not going to be the same thing for me. And you've heard me say that in class.
Right. Well, and I could already see it again, and this is where reflection and journaling is good for leaders, and this is where reflection is journaling, and journaling is good for anybody who is in any combat sport, or not combat sport, combat practice. I'm beginning not to put together a game that's not even close to being it, but it's the analysis of the self that is the key thing. It's the analysis of the drivers. It's the analysis of, okay, this is your overall doctrine. That's fine. These are the various tactics you're learning. That's fine. I even wrote this in my jiu-jitsu journal the other day. Can you put together not a series of tactics? Forget that. Can you put together 2 in a row? Let's just start with that. Can you do 2 things in a row against anybody in a omoplata? Can you in a roll? Can you put together 2 things in a row and flow with that other person? If you can do that, and you're in a 3-minute roll, you're doing tower, you're in a 3-minute roll, you're in a 5-minute roll, whatever, and the rest of it, the other 80% of it is just survival, take the 20 and walk away. Take the 20%. That's a win. I don't think that people are wired in that way anymore. I think people used to be, for sure. Take the 20% and call it a win.
Well, as a culture, I think it's starting to.
Yeah. I think it shifted a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think it shifted a long time ago, because now it's, if I can't get 100%, then I'm out. And that, okay, well, then you're not going to get 100. The first 10 minutes, you're not going to get 100%. Heck, you're not going to, by the belt system, or, just by practice, you're not going to get 100% for 9 years. I guess
it might take longer than that. It really depends.
Right.
And it really depends on your instructor. It really depends on the actual, because my instructor always talks about follow the plan. Listen to the plan, follow your plan. It just goes into what you're able to input and take out of it when the instruction is given. And there's anything that you do in life, there's 3 levels. You have people that can teach and be decent. You have people that are really good but are decent instructors. And then you have, or simply cannot teach.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And you got that.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have the one, which is fine. You know, it's like, all right, I'm just an athlete. I don't teach.
Right.
And it's like, all right, cool. Power to you. You know that.
Right.
And some people, they get a reality check and their ego gets so hit so hard. You're going, what was that about? And then going into the last concept of you have a good hybrid that are both good competitors, good athletes, and good teachers. So,
yeah. We're going to talk about ego in a minute, but back to the book. Broken Rhythm from the Tao of Jeet Kune by Bruce Lee. Page 62 in my version, by the way. Josh has the exact same version, but his is a bestseller with 700 and some odd thousand copies sold. Mine was a bestseller with 598,000 copies sold. So I have a more original edition of the Tao of Jeet Kune, I guess. Or maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what I've got going on here, but definitely got something going on here. So when you pick up your copy, you will see, hopefully the pagination will be the same. But this is back in the section that talks about qualities of a Jeet Kune player. Broken Rhythm. Ordinarily, two fighters of equal ability can follow each other's movements, and unless there is a considerable difference in speed, they are very likely to stalemate each other. The movements of attacking and defending work almost in rhythm with each other. They have a sequential relationship which makes the proper timing of each movement dependent on the previous movement. Although there is a slight advantage in the initiative of the attack, it must be backed by superior speed in order to land successfully. However, when the rhythm is broken, speed is no longer the primary element in the success of the attack or counterattack of the man who has broken the rhythm. If the rhythm has been well established, there is a tendency to continue in the sequence of the movement. In other words, each man is motor set to continue the sequence. The man who can break this rhythm by a light hesitation or an unexpected movement can now score an attack or counterattack with only moderate speed. His opponent is motor set to continue with the previous rhythm, and before he can adjust himself to the change, he has been hit. That is why the stroke on time is usually a pretty stroke, for it seems to catch its victim flat-footed. Timing has to be felt and mastered as a psychological problem, even more than as a fighting problem, for the breaking of the rhythm lies on the fact that the victim is going to continue for a fraction of a second in the sequence of movements which has suddenly been interrupted. Sometimes timing involves attacking with many threatening movements, feints. If the defender accepts this rhythm and attempts to parry these various threats, then a slight hesitation will break the rhythm and provide the opportune moment to launch the final attack. On other occasions, when your opponent is in the midst of making advances or threatening movements on his own account, you may succeed in breaking the rhythm by first apparently reacting as he expects and then suddenly launching a counterattack when he thinks you should be following the feint. You should land, for he is motor set to continue with his threats and cannot adjust himself to the necessity of parrying until after you have scored. In general, timing here means that you initiate your attack or movement when your opponent has started preparation of an attack. Thus, timing becomes a question of taking advantage of the slightest interval before he can readjust himself to make a parry. This applies everywhere, and the reason why I'm bringing this up for leaders is timing is everything.
It's so interesting too when you think about it, because I'm just making a side comment because it was I just remember watching all the documentaries about Bruce Lee and hearing people talk about him and everything. That dude legit had an actual spider sense. He legitly did. And for what people say, he was there and he just felt your energy about to go through it. We're going to be cliche and just go with key. Yeah. And he just felt what you were about to do. And he already pop.
Yep.
He already opened you up and folded you like a wallet. So it's just one of those things to where you're like, bro, he has a natural act of figuring it out before it happens. And if you want to look at it in the correlation of jiu-jitsu as a whole as well, let's take it back for when you and I rolled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The last time you and I rolled, you asked me, what are you doing that is there's something you're doing and I'm seeing it, but I'm not understanding it. And you looked at me so dumbfounded when I said, I was like, I'm feeling what you're doing, so I know what you're about to do.
Right.
And you looked at me and went, I hate you.
Right, fine. But I mean, that's the only answer to that. Fine, thank you. No, I will not have another. Let me go write that down. Go think about that. But no, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're doing something. I feel that movement coming in. You're shifting to where like now my timing goes into where now I can capitalize on that timing or start moving and try to capitalize on it.
Well, okay. So I'm going to use this as a very minimal example here of the exact same thing. So I had a meeting with a person who might be a potential client yesterday from a large organization, right? With another individual who I've never worked with before. I don't know this individual, right? But he's a professional offering a professional service in a space similar to mine. So we're both kind of talking with this client, right? Because we both want to work with this individual and they wanted to talk to both of us. And the level of flow that I was able to establish with the client and then with that other party, while he was saying things and I was anticipating what he was going to say and then he actually said it, or I was anticipating what she was going to say. And by the way, this is a client from a totally different culture and a totally different part of the world, right? But even the words that she picked, I was able to go, oh, I know what I was able to make those correlations, like the synapses are firing, and she's talking about leadership, and she's talking about her staff, and she's talking about the things that are going on in her culture, and the things that are frustrating her with her senior leadership, and yada, yada, yada. And the guy's talking about these things that he can do and what his experiences are, and I'm flowing between both of them. It's the exact same thing that if you had been sitting in that conversation with me, you'd have been like, what did you just say to those people? Like, I don't know what just happened there. Mm-hmm. And I would have said exactly the same thing to you that you said to me after the role. But like, I don't, because I just know.
You know the system.
I know the system. Mm-hmm. But I know the system after doing it for, like I said, almost 10 years. And then even before that, 20 years in higher education. So like, I've got let's be conservative. I've got 15 to 20 years behind me of just seeing the patterns over and over and over again, seeing the timing over and over and over again in interpersonal communication interactions. And by the way, yes, I know everybody interpersonal communicates. That's what we're doing right now on the podcast. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, seeing it and being intentional about pushing people in a particular direction and in using language in a particular direction to gain or to engender a particular response, and then activating on that response. That's verbal jiu-jitsu. I learned a ton of that stuff from doing conflict management and mediation work, a ton of that stuff from doing negotiation work, because what that work does is it forces you as a person to pay attention to what the other person is doing, to pay attention to where their mind is going. Just like in jiu-jitsu, it forces you to pay attention to where their body is going. Uh-huh. And at a certain point, sure, I will roll with Josh again in, like I said, in 9 years, and he'll have 9 years on me, and he'll just be 9 years better, and it'll be great. It'll be fine. And he'll still know more than what I know, and he'll still be rolling. He'll still be able to roll me over, and it'll be ridiculous. And the thing that will happen over time is I will get better and better at sensing those things. And there's a shirt I have that says iron sharpens iron in that respect, right? The other dynamic that's going on in this, and I want to relate it to leadership here, is when Lee talks about breaking rhythm, this is even in the space of launching a product to a market or launching a new idea. My second book, I'll use my second book as an example. The title of my second book is called My Boss Doesn't Care. 100 Essays on Disrupting Your Workplace by Disrupting Your Boss, right behind me there. The little red book. That book I released in 2016. That book was way too freaking early. I sold like.
So we're doing a new ad campaign coming up soon?
Well, you know what? I sold 2 books a month. I don't have to. It's moving right now. Because guess what? Now it's on time. Before it was too early. I read the tea leaves, and I jumped too early. And sometimes you jump too late. It is really hard to be on time. It is really hard because there's a ton of dynamics that are going on in leadership. There's a ton of dynamics that are going on in the market Product market fit is one of the hardest things for a startup to get, or any kind of business to get, because you cannot anticipate the market because there's too many variables. Just like in jiu-jitsu, just like in life, just like in leadership, there are too many variables. So pick the variables that you want to work on your timing on and flow with those. That's my only thought there. Timing is everything. That, and as we get ready to round the corner on our close here, you got to kill the ego, right? We've kind of danced around this, and danced around this, and danced around this.
Let's hit it.
Let's hit it. Let's talk about the ego.
Jiu-jitsu kills ego. That's a whole.
Yes, it does.
Just talk about it too, because you've seen it to where people come and go.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll see it to where, as a whole, you'll see that they start getting into it, right? And they got this "I'm gonna beat my chest" mentality, like I'm gonna smash, and I'm going, and I'm like, okay,
okay.
and that kind of goes right into it, and thinking back to it as well, talking to my wife specifically, saying, are you not worried about other people going into the process? Like, no. And if you think about it, when the most dangerous individuals in jiu-jitsu are not, and anyone that's listening right now that goes through it, that's been around for a little bit, are not the black belts, are not the brown belts, are not the purple belts. Some are blue belts, depends on the blue belt. It's primarily, though, the white belts.
It's the spazzy white belts.
I've come home so many times with a black eye, with a dent in my cheek from just getting hit with an elbow, or my shoulders all scratched up because of the fighting and everything else. And I one time I was at an invite smash pit, Animal House smash pit. It's my friend, he has a giant shed in his backyard, and it's invite only.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy is an animal, giant dude, beautiful personality, beautiful human being, old school jiu-jitsu.
Oh, okay.
Does not care about your feelings.
Oh, yeah, no.
And it's just so beautiful to roll with him, and you're going, yes. And then at the end of it, you think it's, oh yeah, because it's just, because I got music playing at the academy.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I got music playing, and it's diverse to a degree.
We've clearly had discussions about the diversity of music. It's fine. It's all right. It's all right. I'm moving up.
I don't.
It's 10 years. It's fine. I'm moving up the hierarchy. It's 10 years. It's okay. I'll bide my time. One day.
I'll play with my Rage Against the Machine. All right.
One day. I'm biding my time. Just one day.
And then,
silently hanging out in the back. Just remember, he's lurking in the back. He's lurking
absolutely,
back there.
Absolutely. I think the fun part is too, because there won't be any music playing in his shed at all. Every once in a while he'll play music. But he's a seasoned competitor.
Yeah.
He's a seasoned competitor. He's a 2-time world champion. And he knows what he's doing. Very good at what he does. And his mind goes, you're not going to have that in a tournament.
Right.
Music's not going to be playing in the background where you hear AC/DC just go, dun, da, da. You just hear, you're going, just, I don't know, or Korn starts playing, like, da, da. You start headbanging with the riff or whatever, right? And
he's all about taking away all the crutches. Just take away all the crutches because we got to get to the core thing. That's exactly what it is. We got to get it. We got to get to the core thing.
Yep. And so that kind of goes right to the point to where he's the nicest guy in the world, and it kind of goes into this process too. And you've heard me talk about this as well, and this is more recent because I'm starting to get more heavy on the competitive level myself. you get used to round robin tournaments and you get used to getting a second chance versus when you're in an IBJJF tournament or a JJF tournament, you don't get a second chance sometimes. So it's just one of those things that you got to go. And that was a good learning experience for me recently when it comes to that, and adopt it more and more. And it's been, 3 going on 4 months now from that tournament. And you've personally seen my mental switch too, because when we do this,
yep,
we clack a nut. I'm not all right.
Yeah, no,
and let's go.
Yep, let's dial in. Well, and that goes with
we're talking about the consistency of the ego.
Right. Well, the ego is so sneaky. It's like resistance, right? Like resistance is sneaky, I don't want to, get up at 4:30 in the morning to go to the gym. I'll get up at 4:45. Oh, it's okay. You get up at 4:50. Oh, it's okay. You get up at 5 o'clock. Oh, it's okay. Oh, it's okay. And then, 5 days later, you've blown your entire wad and it's gone. Like it's your whole discipline is gone. That's resistance. That's resistance. Your ego says, oh, I'll get up at 4:45. It'll be fine. And then you hit the thing and you go, wow, screw it. I didn't need to get up. That's the ego. That's the ego. And so ego, pride, resistance, Jiu-jitsu exists, and most combat arts that are about going and doing, not doing, but being combat, as Bruce Lee would say, versus just doing it. Like you're talking about your friend. He's actually in the combat space. He is a combatant. That dude's a warrior. Leave that dude alone. That dude's a warrior. Stay the heck away from him. You don't want to bother with him. You don't want to muck with him. Just leave him alone. You don't have enough game to walk up to him and deal with him. Matter of fact, people who are professional warriors probably don't have enough game to walk up and deal with that dude. They probably leave him alone. Okay, fine. If you are a nurse, or you are a person who's a druggist or a pharmacist, or you're a person who's walking off the street and you're a college student, if you're somebody who is just doing this as something to fulfill your in between, I got to get fitness routine, there's plenty of other options than jiu-jitsu. But if you're a person who wants to get your ego broken and wants to find out something else that's in there after you break your ego, this'll do it. It'll do it. And you will have to subsume your ego. And by the way, it won't always happen in a role. Usually, and this is the subversive thing about jiu-jitsu that no one says, and I haven't seen it written anywhere, you actually get your ego subsumed, and you actually get your ego starts being broken the second you step in and you say, okay, I'm going to play. The second you raise your hand and you say, I'm ready, let's go play. That's the beginning of the cracking of the ice on your ego. And it is the same thing with leadership, by the way. I made this point in my book, 12 Rules for Leaders. When you raise your hand to be a leader, that's when the ego starts getting broken. And the leadership that fails and the leaders that fail, because leadership is a behavior and leaders are people, when that leadership behavior fails, and when that leader fails, it's because they could not break the ego. They didn't want to allow it. Their pride and their arrogance and their stubbornness and their resistance just wouldn't allow it. And then the whole team fails, and the whole thing goes off the rails. At the end here, we've talked for a good long time. This has been a good conversation. Going to get the audio out here fairly soon, so that's coming. Stay tuned. But as we round the corner on our conclusion, I have a whole bunch of ideas about staying on the path. What would you tell leaders, Josh, to keep them on the leadership path here, about BJJ, about MMA, about the combat arts? How can these be helpful for leaders to stay on the path of leadership, or even just get on it at a good on ramp.
So there's an equation: greater, equal to, less than. All right. Let's use the numbers of 3. Mm-hmm. Right. It's easiest way to break something down. It's the easiest way to try to convert into numbers, right? Mm-hmm. So you have people that you're chasing, right? You got 3 people that you idolize and you want what they want. That's the greater than. That's your mentor. That's your life coach. That's your instructor, going right into someone that knows something in a different field way better than you. That's something you're chasing, right? The equal to is someone that is on the same playing field as you in your specific style or specific business model, or wherever the case may be, and you're building each other up, not putting each other down. And then you have the less than. Now, the less than does not make them weaker, doesn't make them inferior, doesn't make them, unequipped or ill-equipped with the matter. It goes into the fact of they're learning, like they don't know nothing. So you're mentoring that person, right? And you're helping them to become equally understandable with you. Right. And that goes right into, as a leader, we have to understand that I do not have a cap. So when we have someone that we look up to, we want what they have, we chase it. Right. So I'm a huge Dragon Ball Z enthusiastic person about Dragon Ball Z. And this is a great way of looking at it. For those that are huge Dragon Ball Z fan freaks like me, mm-hmm. you go into the concept of, think about Goku. Every time he goes in, he's always looking for a fight. Mm-hmm. And think about this. He just says this. Oh man, he's got that. Man, he sounds crazy strong. I can't wait to fight him. You psychopath. Just got told that he can kill you. I know, it's gonna be awesome. So that's the greater than. Yeah. And then you got the guys that are on the equal playing field and you just beat the brakes off each other in class. Mm-hmm. So let's look at it as a martial art level. My instructor, I had multiple different instructors in multiple different arts, and I'm chasing them to get to where they are, to understand their mind and their theory, the thesis of what they're trying to teach. And so what's my intent, right? Or the practicality of where I'm going and the punctuality of what I'm looking at. And reality goes into, I want what they want. Mm-hmm. I want what they want or they have. And I have to take these steps. So I have where I'm at on jiu-jitsu, guys. People didn't understand about jiu-jitsu as a whole, to where a white belt can tap a black belt. So here's the ego check. That black belt didn't take that white belt very serious, and that white belt took that advantage to essentially commit murder yoga.
Right, yeah.
And go in because this is the greatest meme I've seen. It was one of those things to where you're locking up, you got 2 stripes on your white belt. Oh yeah, I'm feeling pretty confident, man. No, let's up the ante. You're a 4-star. You have 4 tabs. You got 4 tabs on
four tabs white belt.
Right. All right. Yeah. Brand new guy comes in. About to call that war.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. That war horn has been blown.
Yep.
Has no idea that he's an all-state American wrestler. Right. He has no idea that the guy is a high-level black belt in judo. Has no idea, and he has this thought process. Goes, I got 14 tournaments under my belt where this guy's got state titles and everything else. Just doesn't know it. I've done that to people to where it's like, if I have them going into where it's like, I know that this person is going to get a wake-up call from this guy. I've done it to people knowing what their background is. All right, yeah, this would be a good fight between you two.
If you
wrecks
ever
them.
do that to me, I will give me a mess. Give me a mess later on.
And
No,
it's just
I see what you're doing. No, I see why. Yeah,
because it goes right and he's like, okay, yeah, yeah. And I felt like the stupid rated Godzilla when they were like doing this when they're running.
yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
They're doing the head bobble. And
You're very,
dumbest
well, you're very
dumbest
excited.
variation. Dumbest variation of Godzilla. But
So you got your greater than, you got your equal to, where you're just
you got
beating the
your less
brains
than.
out of you, and then you got your less than.
So like for me, like so I'm chasing my instructor, the greater than.
Mm-hmm.
On the equal plateau, I have my teammates at my level that we're grinding and we're playing it out. We're loving what we're doing. We're in love with the process, because when you fall in love with the process, you actually grow.
That's right.
And then when you go through on the less than, you got everyone that's under you that you're trying to build up to an understanding of where you are. Because and it's happened to me on the mat. I drive Jordan mad when I do this, and you've seen it. I've done it to a handful of people. It just happens because then you start going to a rabbit hole. You're right down the rabbit hole. Oh, you got this, you got this, got this, got this, got this, got this, got this.
Yeah, and 20 minutes later, Jordan's like, but I just want to know the one thing.
I want to know the one thing.
I just want to know
Sorry.
the one thing.
Sorry, you just have so many different options that you play with. And, the experience goes into when you watch a high level black belt or someone that has a lot of time experiencing, he'll stay in that position. He goes, I have 27 things here.
Right.
Just from here. And then he moves on. And you're going, oh God. Okay. So as a leader, now how I can correlate with the leadership understanding. You're a brand new guy in a field that you don't know nothing. How can you defer someone that's super toxic versus someone that is not super toxic? Right? Because that super toxic person in a work environment is going to get you in a world of trouble.
Absolutely.
How do you deter that, though? My personal opinion is the one that no one really hangs around.
Mm-hmm.
He's the lone wolf. He's the guy that everyone doesn't like because he's good at his job.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, hey, what are you doing here? Oh, you just do this. What? Are you serious? Yeah. All right. And then you build a relationship with them. And then when you have people trying to just like, hey, what? No, don't hang out with that guy. No, they're trying to bring you down to their level.
Right.
And they are scared of that guy. Reality is this guy over here that knows what he's doing, and he's giving all away the dirty ninja secrets. Mm-hmm. And he's just giving away for no money cost. He's like, I tell my students, who wants to learn secret ninja magic?
Right.
And going into that final step, man, they're teaching it into. It's like you and I were going to have that conversation the other night. Mm-hmm. About stuff that I'm trying to figure out myself.
Right.
You don't ask people that don't know what they're doing. You ask people that what they're doing.
Yeah.
And you build a relationship with that person. You can tell when you guys are, I was. As soon as I find out someone was high school prom king or high school whatever, I go, all right, you are all about popularity. I really don't. I quite frankly don't like you. Right? I quite frankly don't like you just to begin with because you're doing this.
Right. You're puffing yourself up.
You're puffing yourself up. Yeah. And start doing this.
Well, wait a minute. Well, there's okay.
No, hold on.
Al Bundy, or the guy who played Al Bundy, he apparently has a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Apparently he's been doing jiu-jitsu for like years. Good.
Oh yeah.
Apparently.
That dude has a world title in trash talking, and he has a world, like he's legit black belt.
That's amazing to me, by the way, when I found that. I was like, Al Bundy? The quarterback?
Yeah. He's legit the biggest trash talker in the world, and he's super good at it. And he's a guy that can back it up. That's what's so great about it. So now let me elaborate on the guys that puff their chest and they
the guys who puff their chest
here.
Out. Yeah.
there's a difference between going, you know what? No, I can do this, because when I do this, I cause a reaction for this to happen.
Right.
Right. So I know the system well enough to where if I do this, which in a live role, if I have you stirred a certain way, I'm hitting you with the planet.
Yeah.
It's if I got to create the off balance, right?
Right.
When you know your job, people hate you because you know your job. Mm-hmm. And then you've either done one or two things, and where failure is a first attempt at learning, and you're going right into one quality of people either don't like you for one or two reasons. One, they don't like your personality, or two, they're scared of you. And as a leader, you have to be scared. You don't have to be scared. Be willing and being ready to be the guy that everyone doesn't like. And for me, I learned from a harsh lesson from being a kid. In the military, you were try to make shit up to go through and be something you're not, because you're trying to fit in. And then when you come to the realization that I just don't care about fitting in, I'm just going to be myself, then they actually weed themselves out, and you'll find out who your true friends are. And quite honest, the ones that actually randomly call me are the ones that actually give a crap about me. I got a dude, his name's Adrian, and he calls me. I do not talk to this guy for months. And then I get a random phone call from him, and he changes his number quicker than anything else. And I had a phone call from this guy. Him and I are one of those guys that's a love-hate relationships.
Yeah.
Very, very, very arrogant, very, very mouthy, arrogant person. But he's super confident on his ability just to be who he is. Mm-hmm. Kind of one of those, that's why it's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
And just goes in, and I got a voicemail from him going, "Hey, man. Miss you at the family reunion, Yeah, give me a call back when you want to catch up." 5 minutes later, he gets a text message from me. "I don't want to talk to you at this very moment." He's from Houston, so he has like that deep Houston accent. So you just like go, "Hey, Poland, gotta catch up soon." And you're going over here going,
no,
shaking your head. It's like, I don't want to talk to you at this very moment, because your personality just frustrated me.
Right. Oh man. Well, this has been a genuine pleasure. We've covered a lot of different areas. This has been a good wrap up for our month, where we looked at the great writers in the martial combat, not just art but practice tradition. We start off with the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, or not the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. We started off with the Book of Five Rings, moved on to Sun Tzu's The Art of War, rounded the corner with Living the Martial Way, and now we're at the end with the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. And so I would like to thank Josh Poland for coming on our podcast today. It was a great conversation talking about jiu-jitsu and life and leadership. Where can people get a hold of you? Where can people find you if they want to stay on the path with you? Where can people find Poland's MMA?
I'm in Granbury, Texas, and you look for Poland's Mixed Martial Arts in Granbury, Texas. The address is 2137 East Highway 377. Landmarkers to keep an eye out for is Carrie's Diner, historical diner. Beautiful, beautiful staff, beautiful food. The oatmeals. And then you got Alex's Pizza right down the hall, and it's pure Manhattan pizza. So it's like super good food, good pizza. Stupid greasy, but it's really good.
All right, all my New York listeners are gonna go, "You don't know." They're gonna be yelling. You don't know Manhattan. You don't know. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I feel the back raking of the wrist right now, and because most of New York are Italians. So they're doing this. Like, you can't
get a good pizza here, from what I understand. but Alex's Pizza is good. Alex's Pizza is good. Yeah,
he's legit a New Yorker. He's a legit New Yorker, and goes in. You hear that thick New York accent, and you're like, He's legit.
That guy's legit.
So you can find me there. I teach anywhere from ages 3 and up. I primarily utilize a martial arts self-defense and in a combative way. I'm not a sports style. I do teach the sport concepts you understand. I'm a combative self-defense school, primarily. And then as well as I use the martial arts to develop leadership concepts. And I think that's also probably why you also invited me to the podcast as well, because I teach through the martial arts. I utilize the martial arts to develop public speaking, life skills, and leadership training to give them something other than kick, block, punch mentality, as well as developing the art of verbal judo.
There you go.
By the way, I'm going to say this last bit.
Mm-hmm.
Every American, or every person rather, around the world needs to have the art of war, the 5 rings, and above all else, a way on how to read a compass. Because you don't know how to read a compass, there's an issue. That last part is just more of a funny bit. You go, hey, why you read a compass? Okay.
Well, because you need to know where your true north is.
You do, because you go through, it's like, oh, that's south. No, that is where the sun sets. You smart guy.
So as I close here, again, I want to thank Josh for coming on the podcast. We will have links to Poland's MMA, his website, and his location, and ways, of course, for you to connect with him on Facebook, which he is on, and on Instagram, which he is on. So we'll have all those links in the player below, in the area, the show notes below the player. It'll be short show notes this week, so you'll be able to get through them really quickly and get a hold of Josh and figure out how he can help you stay on the leadership path, or get on the leadership path. For my part, anyway, how do leaders get out there? How do they get on the path? How do they stay on the path? Well, there's 3 different things you can take from our conversation today about the Tao of Jeet Kune and our conversation with Josh and how everything sort of links together. The first big thing is leaders destroy their own egos. This requires getting humble, getting a mindset shift, gaining self-awareness. By the way, something that helps get self-awareness: journaling, writing things down, figuring out the bridge between your doctrine and your tactics. I think the second thing that we figured out today is leaders understand that how you see matters more than what you're actually looking at. The mindset, the how, matters more than the what, the actual material thing. Now, don't get me wrong, the material thing is very important, but how you're looking at it, how you're looking at the obstacle, how you're looking at the challenge, whether that challenge is in a jiu-jitsu role or whether that challenge is in launching a product to a market, how you look at that challenge matters more than the challenge itself. And leaders who are not only on the path but are attempting to stay on the path, well, they look at the how more often than the what. The third thing we can take today from our conversation for leaders staying on the path is leaders understand that open-handedness and the closed fist are both important for establishing a foundation of success. Sometimes you have to be, as someone else would say, who's infamous in this podcast space, sometimes you have to be default aggressive. But sometimes it's okay to also be indirect, the open hand and the closed fist. But you have to apply the right tactic in the right moment that backs up the particular strategy that acts as a bridge going back to your doctrine that supports what you're doing. And so be ethical, right? Be disciplined, be motivated, but also be intentional and be aware. Staying on the path is not easy, and it is not something for everyone. So think clearly, think candidly, and think courageously before you step out onto the leadership path. Once again, thank you, Josh, for coming on the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. Thank you for all who are watching on the live stream today. And of course, if you're watching this on video later on, please like and subscribe to our channel right here at HSCT Publishing. And of course, tell all your friends about the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast everywhere where you listen to podcasts. And well, that's it for me.